How's it going, everyone? I hope you're all doing good. Welcome to episode 3 of Drawn to Create, the podcast where I draw and talk about anything really. But recently, in the last 2 videos, we have been talking about art-related subjects. I think in the last one, God, I can't remember because I record these a week in advance. So I think in the last one I talked about improving as a self-taught artist, and a lot of you found that pretty helpful. I appreciate all of the positive feedback on these new videos, this long-form content, and it seems to be working well with the YouTube algorithm as well, because YouTube appreciates watch time, and the tutorials don't usually go past that 10-minute mark, and so they maybe don't get recommended as much, whereas YouTube likes to push that content that has a lot of watch time from viewers, and a lot of you enjoy listening to all of this. Maybe you are doing some drawing and just have this on in the background, or maybe you are actually just watching the entire drawing on screen and listening to me talk. And another reason why I enjoy doing these is because it's challenging me to produce a drawing every week, and I'm really setting myself this task of trying to create a full illustration. Not exactly a big illustration. Usually these are about the size of half an A4, so size A5 or something like that. And I usually just create a nice drawing to go along with these episodes and the stuff that I'm talking about. But a lot of the time the drawing isn't actually related to the subjects that I'm discussing, but the drawing is just there so that you can watch it, and these episodes can also be in a video format. And so some of you have asked if I'm going to be, putting this audio stuff on Spotify or iTunes, and I don't really have any I don't really have the intention of doing that yet. I'm just going to wait and see how this plays out, and maybe if there is a bigger demand for it, then I will do. But I like the whole the way that these are formatted with the drawing and then me just talking over them. And so yeah, today what we are going to be talking about, I've put down some notes again as per usual, but today I thought I could get into, it's actually going to be quite personal, this one, because I thought I could talk a bit about self-doubt with your work as an artist, a lack of confidence with your work, and, just overall your own personal perception and relationship with the stuff that you create. A lot of the time we can be discouraged. There is a lot of great artists and great work out there, and it's common to find ourselves comparing our work with others, and that's not good. That's not helpful at all. It's really not healthy for a beginner who is learning how to draw, because they are going to be looking at their own work, which is in the process of developing, and they are themselves in this whole on this journey of improving, and they are looking at a professional who's pretty much not necessarily at the end of their journey, but they're up there. I mean, they've developed their style, they've got a good idea of the fundamentals, and they are just executing their work to a standard which is impressive. And obviously, you shouldn't be looking at your work in contrast to theirs, because it's not going to be of any benefit. But we can discuss all of that stuff more in depth soon as we progress with this discussion. I just want to quickly go off on maybe a tangent and talk about something that I was thinking about the other day. Actually, it's kind of relevant to this discussion anyways, but I was just doing some drawing, and often when I'm drawing I find myself thinking about all of these different things, and I was thinking about how an artist, puts so much of their self-worth into their work. And because obviously I like to try and make some of these discussions personal, I feel like if I give a personal example, it sort of backs up my the point that I'm trying to make. And personally, when I do a lot of drawing, and I've been drawing for a while now, pretty much all of my life, I can't really remember a time when I wasn't creating something. But it really does go back to the reason why we create something, and I think a lot of it is my self-confidence. A lot of my confidence and my sort of self-worth, like I said earlier, is a product of the work that I produce and the overall perception of my work. If it's not that I cannot take criticism, but when someone critiques your work, it is personal because that work is yourself, and you put yourself into your work, and it's almost like someone has personally offended you when they say something negative about your work. In a way, I don't know if any of you can relate to that, but it's kind of strange, and you need to sort of almost, this is what I've realized anyways, you need to sort of separate yourself from the stuff that you produce and move on. There's no real point where you just stop and sit and reflect on your work. I mean, there is, but I try not to do that as often now, because if I get into that cycle of just constantly reflecting on a drawing which I have done in the past, because as soon as you finish a drawing, then it's in the past and you can move on to the next one. But if you stay there and you reflect on it and you start to pick out the bad points, or maybe you're a bit of a perfectionist and you see some slight stuff that's maybe off, you start to really develop this negative sort of attitude towards this piece of work that you have produced, and you put it out there to an audience, and it gets a good reception, a good response, but you are sort of hung up on the bad things that you have noticed about this work that are overall really minor. I don't know if that makes sense, but there's that saying, you are your worst critic, and there's a lot of truth in that. And I just thought I'd bring this up because I don't know if any of you can relate to it, but personally, because I've never really been an outgoing person. I mean, I think I used to be, but then over time, as I grew a bit older, I started to become a little bit introverted and put myself into my own world a little bit and start focusing on things that mattered to me, and I started looking inward rather than expressing myself outwards, if that makes sense. And I used to pretty much produce a lot of artwork as a way for me to not only communicate, but also sort of I don't want to say gain praise, but there's always a bit of that involved, because it's a good feeling to be able to show someone something that you have produced and obviously get a positive response in return. That makes us feel good because we show someone our creation, and if they like it, then it's validation in a sense. I feel like if someone likes your work, then in a way they like you as a person, but I don't know if that's necessarily true. I did used to care about other people's perception of my work as an artist a lot more than I do now, in a way, which is weird because I'm a lot more public with it now when I publish it on YouTube and stuff, and on Instagram to a lot more followers than I used to have. But I think that's maybe encouraged me to be less sort of vulnerable to the criticism. Even though I don't really get a lot of it in comparison to positive comments. A lot of you enjoy the work that I produce, and you usually have something nice to say about it. But every so often there's someone that just gives a little... It comes out of good faith a lot of the time, they're trying to give you a bit of advice, maybe improve it here, or this is what I would do. And you have to take it with... you have to look into it, because if it's coming from an established artist, then take it into consideration and learn from it, because you have to sort of, it's valuable. The criticism is valuable, and a lot of the time it is necessary. But if it's some 12-year-old kid who just wants to comment on your Instagram post or something about your drawing saying this is good, but I'd maybe do this, but I don't think a 12-year-old would say that. Actually, a 12-year-old would probably just comment something like, this is shit, this is dog poo or something. I don't know. But maybe not a 12-year-old. Maybe someone who's a bit older, but maybe not as developed as an artist. And you sometimes I've done this before, which is a bit sad, really. I shouldn't really be doing this, but I remember, obviously I don't do it as much now, but I remember when I posted an image on Instagram. This was a few years ago, and someone left a comment, and they said something. It wasn't bad, but it was like just a bit like it didn't have any substance to the comment. Like, it was a pointless, unnecessary comment about I think they said something about the proportions of this portrait that I did when I used to do a lot of that stuff, And I went over onto their Instagram, and they had a few drawings on there which they have done themselves. And for lack of a better word, it wasn't the most advanced stuff on there. Even though I was just learning, I thought that the stuff that they was producing themselves didn't really validate their comments, and didn't really back up what they were saying, because they wasn't putting their own advice to use. There wasn't there was talking the talk but not walking the walk, in a sense. And yeah, I just thought that was quite funny, because it's whoever that criticism is coming from that matters. Because if it's someone who is respectable and has something valuable to say, then yeah, of course, take it into consideration, reflect on your own work, and maybe try and improve on it. I know that is something that I've learned to do recently. I mean, YouTube is a whole different game in comparison to posting your work on social media like Instagram. And it is quite funny, because a lot of the time YouTube comments, sometimes they're not directed to your work or the actual drawing that you have produced. It's more or less to do with the subject of the video. An example is, for example, if I upload an episode of this, and I know that in the last one, or it might have been in the previous one, sometimes you get some people asking you to upload some different type of content. Maybe because I used to do a lot of portrait stuff, or over the time that I've been on YouTube, I've created a wide array of different types of content, which has its own audience in a sense. People subscribe because of some specific content, and they maybe prefer that over some other content. And so when I upload something like this, and it's not necessarily something that appeals to them, they jump on that video and they say something like, hey, do a video on how to draw an eye. I don't know, it's just an example. They want a video on how to draw an eye realistically. And personally, I'm kind of past all of that stuff. I've done that in the past a lot, and I don't necessarily want to just keep doing that. I want to evolve the content and do stuff that I personally enjoy, because if I'm doing stuff that I enjoy, then I'll put more passion into it, and then you will hopefully enjoy it more. But it's quite funny, because you spend about 20 hours producing some artwork and you're really happy with it, and then you put it out there and some kids just like do this is good, but where's the realistic eye drawing? But yeah, it's just, I don't even know what I was talking about. I've kind of gone off on a bit of a tangent, but I've got a funny story actually, and it goes back to me seeking out validation in terms of my artwork when I was younger. I remember when I was in school, and I was young. I must have been about 8 years old, I think. I was in primary school, and I've always been drawing. I enjoyed drawing, and so I was that kid. I was known as that kid who liked to draw. You always get one of them in the classroom, and I was that guy. And so sometimes people would ask me to draw some stuff, and I'd draw it for them. And I remember sat at this table once, and there was this girl, and she was talking about my drawings and stuff, and I think she asked me if I was good at drawing, which is always an awkward question to ask someone. I mean, how do I answer that without sounding vain? Every time someone does ask me something like that, I usually just say something like, yeah, I'm alright, or something like that. But anyways, yeah, she asked me, she was talking about these drawings, and she was basically pointing out stuff around the classroom, asking if I could draw it. So she would point towards the table and ask if I could draw it, and then I'd say probably, and then she'd point towards a chair or something, and I'd say, yeah, probably, I could probably draw that. And then eventually she just said, what about the entire room? And I just said, I looked around the room, and I just said, yeah, I could probably draw the entire room. And then she sort of sniggered to herself. It was quite patronising actually, and it kind of annoyed me. I remember it kind of annoying me a bit, because it was like she was questioning whether I could actually do it. And I said, yeah, I could probably draw the entire room. And to me, I could, because when I was younger, I would just draw what I would see, and that was all that really mattered. I'd just look at something, an object, notice the contours of the object, and then just draw them. and draw what I saw on paper. And so that's what I did. I decided not to have any dinner that day. I just stayed in over lunch, stayed in the classroom, and I started to draw the entire room that was in front of me. And it was kind of like, the Korean artist Kim Jung-gi. He often produces these drawings which are these wide angle scenes from his own point of view, where he actually draws the sketchbook in his hands and stuff like that. They're actually really cool. Obviously I'm not comparing myself to him, 8-year-old Dan, on par with the master Kim Jung-gi. But that was kind of what I was going for, except I don't think I had drawn my sketchbook on my hands. I would just draw some of the tables in the classroom and then the walls and the ceiling, and I draw it from my own point of view. And so I did this drawing, and then I remember in the afternoon, the last lesson of the day, she was in this class, this girl, and so I took the drawing to her, and I said to her, I have drawn the room. And she said, well, this is what she said. She said, no, you didn't. And I said, yeah, I did. Here's the drawing. This is what I have done. And she said, you didn't do that. And I was literally like, is this girl being serious? I am hungry right now because I didn't have any food because I stayed in over dinner and did this drawing of an entire room, which was probably completely pointless. And now I've presented it to you and you say, you didn't do that, prove it. And I remember that really pissing me off, because not only did I do the drawing and prove that I could do it, but she knew that I did this drawing, and she wasn't giving me the the satisfaction of her acknowledging that I could do this drawing, and that annoyed me so much so that I decided that I would do it again. And so this time, this is the maths class, last lesson of the day. She was on another table, I was on my own table. I pushed the maths book aside, I got some pencils and some paper, and I decided to draw that maths room, the entire room, again. And I remember seeing her look over and notice that I was drawing, but every time I would catch her looking, she'd look away because she didn't want me to notice that she was acknowledging that I was doing this drawing again. She just didn't want to be proved wrong, I don't think, or she didn't just want to give, credit. I don't know, it's weird. People are weird. But anyways, I did the drawing of this room again, and then obviously it was the last lesson of the day, and so the bell rang, school was over, and as everyone was getting up and packing their bags, I walked over to her table and I dropped the old drawing of the room on her table, and then I went and dropped the new drawing of the room on her table, and she looked at them, and I didn't even give her any time to respond. I just walked away. I just grabbed my bag, walked out the room, and that was it. I just left them on her table, proved her wrong, and walked away. And it was fair to say that I was pretty satisfied, but I kind of forgot the reason why I was even telling you all of this, but I think it was to sort of tie it back into that ego as an artist. 8-year-old me had an ego, and so it really sort of lit that fire for me to prove to someone that I could do something. And I've always had that kind of characteristic of, if someone says that I can't do something, then it sort of makes me want to do it more, And so I encourage all of this criticism because it makes me just want to improve on that and get better at it. And that's, I suppose that's a good way to approach it. Just use it as fuel. Use all the negative responses and all of this stuff as fuel for you to improve, because when you are learning, if you have the courage to put your work out there, especially when you are learning, and the drawings aren't going to be correct or amazing because you're learning, and so that's part of it. You're going to fail and improve and make mistakes, and if you have the courage to put your work out there regardless, just to document your journey from A to B in a sense, then I praise you for that, because that takes a lot of doing. Usually people like to only present their best work, and it's good to know that behind all of that really good work, that presentable work, there is likely a load of not so good work, and it's just not pushed in your face, as is the work that the artist wants you to see. And obviously that makes sense, because if an artist is building a portfolio and they get to choose between some work that is correct and work that is successful, compared to some work that obviously needs improving, they're obviously going to put the good work forward, which makes sense. But it's good just to realize that a lot of the time there's a process behind everything that is created, and within that process there was likely a lot of iterations, corrections. There was mistakes that were made and then improved on, and it's good to acknowledge that. I think that end product wouldn't be the same if it wasn't for all of that. All of that is necessary, and I try and keep that in mind. It's good to know that when you look at another artist's work. I think that's why I enjoy looking at an artist's creative process and taking a look behind the scenes, because you get to see them as a person and you get to see their approach and how they tackle and overcome these problems. And that's what I'm really trying to do with a series like this, a podcast where I can talk about the difficulties as much as I can talk about, the good things, because that's really just life in general. There's tragedies, there's failures, and then there's success and moments of happiness, and all of that makes you appreciate either one of them. Well, maybe not the bad stuff, but without the bad stuff you wouldn't appreciate the good stuff. But you can sort of tie that back into drawing as well, or in anything really. But anyways, I've really been going off on a tangent. I've just been talking, and I'm just looking at these notes which I have put down here. Underneath self-doubt, I have put address these thoughts, and I think we can build on this a little bit. I think what I mean by this is, say if you have a negative perception of your own work, or maybe you are not too happy with it, then try and address the reason why you are feeling that way. So in a sense, you have to separate yourself from that work. And again, that is really important. What you create and the overall response, the outside response to your creations, is not a response to you as a person. And that is something that I am, that is something that I know now. And I used to take it really personal, but now it's the work, it's what I produce, it's not me as a person. But yeah, you need to address these problems, and the way that I would do this is, for example, if it is something literal, like if it is something in the work that you are not happy with, maybe you have drawn a character or you have drawn an environment, maybe the perspective is wrong, or maybe the anatomy isn't quite right. And I mean, when it comes to anatomy, I can relate to that, because when I draw from my imagination, when I try to draw characters, I struggle with that a little bit. I mean, if I have a reference in front of me, or I'm drawing from an image of a reference image of a character or a person in a certain pose, that's fine, I can do that. But if I try to rely on my own imagination to draw people, then I find it quite challenging. Only because it's sort of like I haven't really spent as much time studying that subject as much as I have when it comes to something like perspective, and that's why I'm a lot more confident when drawing buildings and environments. But I'm trying to combine sort of all of these things every time I do an illustration, so that I'm approaching all of these problems. But yeah, so if it's something literal in the work, say if you realise that something is quite off or not quite right, and you might not notice it if you are a beginner, but usually if you look at a piece of artwork, you can sense, you have a feeling that something isn't quite right, even though you might not be able to point out what it is specifically. You still know that something isn't quite right. But if you can realise what that is, then take that into consideration and be truthful and honest with yourself, and say to yourself, this is what I need to improve at. Okay, so then what you have done is you have found the source of the problem, and now you can start to work out an effective way to resolve it. And that's kind of like the stuff that I spoke about last week in the previous episode, how you can actually, approach these problems with strategy and efficiency. So I'd recommend checking out last week's episode if you haven't already. But yeah, once you realize what the problem is, then you can start to plan a way to resolve it. And if you resolve it, then hopefully you will help remove those doubts and that negative feeling you have towards your work. But do keep in mind that you will naturally always have a more critical response to your own work in comparison to others. It's quite funny because if you ever get some bad criticism from someone, I always laugh because a lot of the time if someone says something about my work, then I just think like, yeah, well, I've already thought that 10 times over and 10 times worse about my own work and about myself. So anything you say, I'll take into consideration, but trust me, I noticed that. And when it comes to my drawing, there's definitely errors and things that I need to work on, but that's what it's all about. You'll always have stuff to improve on, but that doesn't mean that you don't even start doing anything in the first place, right? You have to start, and then once you get going, you just keep going, and you just take it as it comes, and that's what it's all about. You just got to stick with the process. Everything is a process, and you want to try and create a process for yourself that is enjoyable. And so you really have to rely on the things that you can actually control. And what I mean by that is the amount of hours that you spend drawing and studying and working. That stuff is in your control. What isn't in your control is the amount of followers you have on Instagram or other people's response and opinion towards your work. There's that quote, I'm not sure what the source of it is, but there's the quote which goes something like, other people's opinions are none of my business. And I like that one because you can apply it to creating artwork, but you can apply it to everything as well. I mean, you just stay in your own lane, and if you like your own work and you enjoy doing something, then anybody else's opinions are irrelevant because you are doing what you enjoy. And so don't let anyone take that away from you. And going back to talking about some of the stuff that you cannot control, like social media followers, other people's opinions, or maybe you don't get as many opportunities as other people around you. All of that stuff you cannot really control, but then if you sort of go all in on the stuff that you can control, for instance, hard work, studying, drawing a lot and repeatedly doing that, then you will tweak the scale of these other things that you cannot control. So if you get better at drawing from the hard work, then you will naturally gain more followers, and then you will have more opportunities that come up around you. Other people will start to appreciate your work, and so if you put all of your energy and time into the stuff that is in your control and worry about that stuff, then all of the other stuff will naturally follow anyways. And I think that is a good way to approach all of this stuff. And it's kind of a realization for me as well, because doing these episodes, the way that I sort of try and construct these thoughts in my head and then actually bring them out and speak about them, it sort of it gives them more validity in a sense. Like if I just think about these things, then they exist only as thoughts and it's hard for me to process them. But if I talk about them and I put them out there, I mean, sometimes they might not make any sense at all. It might just be nonsense, but I mean, sometimes it might have some value for you as well. And so I might as well just go ahead and put it out there, because if it doesn't help me, then it might help someone else, or vice versa. So yeah, I'm excited to see how these episodes will evolve in the future. Right now I'm talking about a lot of art-related stuff, but I'd also like to maybe just talk about things in general. I mean, I'd like to use this as a way for me to document my own process as an artist, as a human being on this earth who's trying to find a way to create and fulfill their desire to create stuff in a sense. But again, this isn't just about me. This is about you as well. I want to have something out there that helps people, and I want to be truthful, honest, and genuine, because I think the world needs a lot more of that these days, especially on YouTube and especially on social media. Everything's so processed, and I've been talking about this word process a lot, but processed in a way which means pre-planned, and content is packaged and presented in a way which has, I don't know, a lot of people seem to have an agenda. They have to tick boxes in order to meet, requirements which generate revenue or other things. I don't know where I'm going with this, but I think what I'm trying to say is I just want to make some good content that comes from me, and I don't want it to be affected by any of these distractions, which are, a lot of people place importance on things like views and money, and all of that stuff is necessary and enables me to do this, but the priority is the content and the response from all of you that listen and watch my videos. And I appreciate you a lot if you have spent the time with me today to listen to this. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope I had something valuable to say. Next week, I don't really know what I'm going to talk about, but I'll figure it out, and it should hopefully be another good episode in the ever-developing and evolving podcast Drawn to Create. I am Dan Beardshaw. I don't really like to end stuff like this. It sounds really formal, like I am your host, Dan Beardshaw, and thank you for listening. So, but anyways, take care of yourself, everyone. Keep drawing, keep creating, doing whatever it is that you love to do, and I will see you in the next one.